Tund was a young man who had everything most people only dreamed of. He was the owner of many companies, lived in a large mansion and drove the best cars in the city. People called him the Golden Man, but deep inside Tund did not feel golden at all. He felt lonely. Every smile he saw around him came because of his money. Every person who called him sir or dear only wanted something from him. He had tried to find love many times, but every time, it ended the same way. When he gave gifts, the women smiled. When he stopped giving, they disappeared. It broke his heart to think that no one really cared for him. One quiet night, he sat alone in his living room. The walls were covered with paintings, the lights were bright, and the air smelled of expensive perfume. But none of it made him happy. He whispered to himself, "All this money can buy everything except love. Maybe if I hide my wealth, I will find someone who loves me for who I am." The next morning, Tund woke up with a plan. He opened his wardrobe and ignored the designer suits. Instead, he picked a simple shirt and a pair of old jeans. He looked at himself in the mirror and smiled faintly. "Now, I just look like an ordinary man," he said. He went to his garage where many cars were parked, shiny and new. But he didn't want to use any of them. At the far end of the garage stood an old taxi car that used to belong to his late father. It was faded, the paint scratched, but it still worked perfectly. Tund decided that he would become a taxi driver. He wanted to meet people who didn't know his name, who wouldn't bow to him because of money. That morning he drove out into the busy city, his heart light for the first time in years. The roads were noisy, full of people hurrying to work. Vendors shouted, cars honked, and the smell of roasted corn filled the air. Tund drove slowly, stopping whenever someone raised a hand for a ride. He greeted every passenger with a smile. Some ignored him, others grumbled, but a few said thank you. For Tund, even a simple thank you felt more valuable than gold. By afternoon he parked his taxi under a tree near the market. He ate a small meal from a street vendor and watched people walk by. He saw mothers carrying babies, young men selling goods and children laughing. These people have little, he thought, but they smile more than I do. The next morning, while driving through the city again, a young woman waved for a ride. She wore a simple blue dress and carried a small bag of bread. Her face looked tired but kind. Tund stopped the car and opened the door. "Good morning," she said softly. "Good morning," he replied. "Where are you going?" "To the bakery on King Street, please." He nodded and the taxi began to move. For a while neither of them spoke. Then she looked at him through the mirror and asked, "How long have you been driving a taxi?" Tund smiled. "Not long. I just started." She laughed lightly. "You drive carefully. That's rare." He chuckled. "I try my best. I don't want trouble." When they reached her stop, she gave him the fare and added a small extra coin. "Keep the change," she said politely. Tund was surprised. Most people argued to pay less, but this woman gave him more. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome," she replied, smiling warmly before walking away. For the first time in many months, Tund felt something different. He watched her enter the bakery, still smiling. Something in her kindness touched his heart. She didn't see a rich man, he whispered to himself. She only saw a person. The next few days, Tund found himself driving through the same street at the same time, hoping to see her again. Sometimes she waved and entered his taxi. They talked about little things, the weather, work, and life. Her name was Amara. She told him she worked long hours baking bread but still found joy in small things. "When life is hard," she said once, "I just thank God that I can still smile." Her words stayed with Tund long after she left the taxi. That night, he sat on his bed thinking about her. Amara didn't wear fancy clothes or makeup. She didn't speak like the rich women he knew, but her heart was full of light. Every time he drove her home, she thanked him. Sometimes she offered him bread from the bakery, saying, "You must be tired. Please eat." It reminded him of something he had forgotten: simple kindness. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned orange, Tund parked his taxi near the river. He watched people walking home from work and thought about Amara again. He smiled, remembering her laughter. "Maybe this disguise wasn't just a game," he said softly. "Maybe it's the beginning of something real." Later that night, he returned to his mansion quietly. His guards greeted him, confused to see him in old clothes. One of them whispered, "Sir, why do you keep doing this taxi thing?" Tund smiled gently. "Because it makes me feel alive." He walked into his house, past all the gold decorations and shiny floors, and sat in the same chair as before. But this time he didn't feel empty. He thought of Amara's smile, her kindness, and her honest words. That night he wrote in his diary, "I met someone different today. She has nothing but she gives more than anyone I've ever known. As the clock ticked and the city lights glowed outside, Tund realized that for the first time, he looked forward to tomorrow, not for business, not for meetings, not for money, but just to see one kind woman who made him feel human again. He didn't know what the future would bring, but deep inside, he hoped that this simple taxi journey might lead him to something that all his riches could never buy: true love. Amara worked at a small bakery in the corner of a busy street. The place always smelled of freshly baked bread, and the walls were warm from the ovens that never seemed to rest. Every morning she woke up before sunrise, tied her headscarf neatly and hurried to the bakery. Life was not easy for her, but she had learned to find joy in small things, in the smell of dough, in the laughter of customers, and in the satisfaction of earning her own living. She didn't have much, just a small rented room and a few clothes, but she was thankful. Her boss often said, "Amara, you smile too much for someone with so little." She would just laugh and say, "Smiling costs nothing." Every evening after a long day of baking she would step out tired but happy. And without fail she would see the old taxi waiting at the corner. The driver, Tund, would wave at her with that familiar smile. "Long day?" he would ask. "Very long," she would reply, giggling softly as she got into the taxi. Those rides home became the best part of their days. At first they spoke little, polite greetings, small talk about the weather. But as weeks passed they began to share more. One evening, as rain tapped gently on the car windows, Tund asked, "Do you believe good people still exist?" Amara looked out at the wet streets, her eyes thoughtful. "Yes," she said after a pause. "Not everyone is bad. Some just need a reason to be kind." Her words touched Tund deeply. He thought about all the people he had met, the fake smiles, the empty promises, the greed, and then about this simple woman who believed in goodness even when life had not given her much. He couldn't help but smile. "You really believe that?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes. Kindness is like bread. You give a piece and somehow it multiplies." From that evening, something began to change in Tund's heart. Every day after his taxi work, he found himself driving past her bakery. Sometimes he would stop just to buy a loaf of bread. Other times he would pretend to be passing by, but Amara always noticed. "Back again?" she would tease. "Your bread is the best in the city," he would reply with a grin. Amara laughed, shaking her head. "You say that every day." "And it's true every day," he said softly. The other workers at the bakery began to notice. "That taxi driver likes you," one of them whispered. Amara blushed. "Don't say that," she said quickly, but her heart felt warm. Tund, on the other hand, was learning more about life from her than he ever did in his rich world. He saw how she treated everyone: the beggar at the door, the customers who shouted, even the little boy who came to beg for bread. She never turned anyone away empty-handed. One morning when he arrived, he saw her struggling to carry a heavy bag of flour into the bakery. He jumped out of the taxi and ran to help her. "Let me," he said. Amara smiled gratefully. "You don't have to. You must be tired from driving all day." "I don't mind," he replied. "I like helping you." After that day he began visiting often, fixing small things around the bakery, cleaning the fan or repairing broken chairs. Amara started calling him Mr. Helper. The children who came to buy bread called him Brother Driver. Everyone liked him because he was always smiling. But no one knew he was a billionaire. Tund loved the peace of the bakery, the smell of freshly baked bread, the laughter of Amara, and the simple happiness that filled the place. For the first time he felt like he belonged somewhere, not as a rich man but as a human being. One afternoon when business was slow, Amara brought him a small plate of warm bread. "Here," she said, "you help too much. You should eat." He took a bite and nodded. "It's delicious." She smiled. "My mother taught me how to bake before she died. I was very young but I never forgot her recipe." Tund looked at her with gentle eyes. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" Amara sighed softly. "Yes. But crying never brings food to the table. So, I work and thank God for another day." Her strength amazed him. She had nothing, yet she had peace. He had everything, yet he was only just learning what peace meant. As days passed, Tund started staying longer at the bakery. Sometimes he helped serve customers, other times he just watched Amara work. He noticed how she wiped sweat from her forehead, how she laughed easily, and how she always gave bread to hungry children without waiting for payment. One day, when a poor old woman came and said she had no money, Amara handed her a loaf of bread and said, "Don't worry. Just pray for us." The woman smiled and left. Tund was silent for a while, then said quietly, "You're amazing." Amara shook her head. "No. I'm just doing what I can." Later that evening, as Tun drove her home, she turned to him and said, "You're different, you know?" He laughed. "Different how? You're kind. You don't talk like other men. Most people only help when they want something in return." Tun smiled, but inside he felt something twist in his chest. He wanted to tell her who he really was, that he was not a poor taxi driver but one of the richest men in the city. Yet he was afraid. He didn't want to lose the trust she had in him. That night, after dropping her off, he sat in the car for a long time, staring at the stars. He whispered, "She sees me as a simple man, and for once I don't want to be anyone else." At home, his assistant met him at the gate, looking worried. "Sir, you've been ignoring your meetings for weeks. People are asking questions." Tund waved his hand. "Let them ask. I'm fine." But the assistant didn't understand. How could he explain that he had found something more important than meetings? Something that made him feel alive again. The next morning, Tund returned to the bakery early. The sun was just rising, painting the sky gold. Amara was already there, kneading dough with her hands. He stood quietly for a moment, watching her work, smiling softly. "Good morning," he said finally. She looked up, surprised, then smiled. "You're early." "I didn't want to miss the first bread of the day," he said. They laughed together. And as the smell of fresh bread filled the air, Tund realized that every day with her was teaching him more about love. Not the kind he had seen in rich parties or luxury dinners, but real love that grows in honesty, in kindness, and in small, ordinary moments. He didn't know what would happen next, but one thing was clear. Amara had already changed his life. The afternoon sky grew dark with heavy clouds. The wind howled softly through the narrow streets, and the smell of wet earth filled the air. Amara stood in front of her small bakery, looking up at the sky. "It's going to rain soon," she whispered to herself, worried. Inside the bakery, the warm scent of bread mixed with the sound of thunder rolling in the distance. Customers hurried to buy bread before the storm came. Amara tried to smile, even though her heart was heavy. Rainy days were bad for business. Few people came out and she often ended up losing money. Within minutes, the rain began to fall hard. Water ran down the street, splashing against her feet. Amara quickly moved the trays of bread away from the door, trying to keep them dry. She covered the baskets with an old cloth and stood outside under the little roof, hoping the rain would stop soon. But it didn't. The clouds opened wider and the rain came down like a waterfall. The wind blew hard, sending splashes onto her face and soaking her headscarf. She hugged herself tightly, shivering from the cold. Suddenly, through the heavy rain, a figure appeared. It was Tund, running toward her with a big black umbrella. His shirt was half wet, and his shoes splashed in puddles as he hurried to her. "Amara," he called out, almost shouting through the sound of the storm. She turned and blinked in surprise. "Tund? What are you doing here?" He reached her side, holding the umbrella over her head. "You can't stand in the rain," he said gently. "You'll catch a cold." She laughed lightly, though her voice trembled from the cold. "I have to protect the bread, not myself." Tund smiled. "Then let me help you protect it." Together they started moving everything inside. The baskets, the trays, even the wooden table outside. The rain kept pouring, but they didn't care anymore. Water dripped from their clothes, their hands brushed as they worked, and laughter filled the air between them. At one point, Amara slipped on the wet floor and Tund caught her just in time. For a moment their eyes met. The sound of the rain softened in their ears. She quickly looked away, her cheeks warm despite the cold. "Thank you," she said quietly. He smiled. "Always." They sat together after everything was safe inside. Amara brought out 2 small plates and shared some bread and stew she had made earlier. The little bakery felt cozy now. The smell of warm food, the sound of rain outside, and the soft flicker of the lantern light made everything peaceful. Tund watched her as she ate, her fingers light and graceful, her eyes full of quiet strength. He wanted to tell her everything, that he was not really a taxi driver, that he owned companies, cars, and houses. But he was afraid. What if she changed after knowing? What if she started seeing him like everyone else, as a man made of money, not heart? So he said nothing. Instead, he asked softly, "Do you ever get tired of working so hard?" Amara shook her head. "Sometimes. But when I see my customers happy, it gives me strength. I may be poor, but my work feeds people. That's enough for me." Tund looked at her in silence. Her words were simple, yet they carried a deep truth. She had something money couldn't buy: contentment. Outside, the rain still poured, beating gently against the windows. Amara smiled faintly and said, "Rainy days remind me of my mother. She used to say that rain washes away pain and brings new blessings." Tund smiled too. Then maybe this rain is washing something for both of us. Amara looked at him, confused. What do you mean? He hesitated, then laughed softly. Never mind. Just something I thought. She chuckled. You talk like a poet sometimes, Tund. Maybe I am one, he said with a grin. She laughed and the sound warmed his heart. As the night deepened, the bakery lights glowed softly against the dark sky. The streets were empty except for the rain, which had slowed to a calm drizzle. Amara leaned on the counter looking out. It's so quiet now, she said. Yes, Tund replied, but it's peaceful. She turned to him. You know, most people hate the rain. But I like it. It teaches patience. You can't stop it, you just wait for it to end. He nodded slowly. You're full of wisdom, Amara. Maybe the rain didn't just bring me here to help. Maybe it brought me here to learn. She smiled. Learn what? That not all treasures are made of gold, he said softly. Amara looked at him and laughed lightly, not knowing he was speaking the truth in more ways than she could imagine. When the rain finally stopped, the air was cool and fresh. The stars peeked through the clouds and water shimmered on the street like silver. Amara stood at the door, watching the reflection of the moon in a puddle. Tund came beside her. It's beautiful, she said. It is, he agreed, but his eyes were on her, not the sky. Amara didn't notice. She simply sighed. Thank you for coming today, Tund. I didn't expect anyone to care that much. He smiled faintly. I'll always care. She turned to look at him, her heart beating faster for reasons she couldn't explain. For a brief moment, the world felt still. No sound, no fear, just the warmth between two souls who found comfort in each other's presence. Then Amara spoke softly. You're a good man. Tund looked away, hiding the pain behind his eyes. If only you knew who I really am, he thought. He drove her home that night, both quiet in their thoughts. When she got out of the taxi, she said, See you tomorrow? He nodded. Of course. As she walked away, Tund sat in his car, watching her until she disappeared into her small house. He leaned back, exhaling deeply. The truth was burning inside him, waiting to come out, but his heart wasn't ready. He whispered to himself, She loves the simple man. Will she still love the billionaire? That night, as he lay in bed, he couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the evening, her laughter, her kindness, her voice. The rain had brought them closer, but it had also washed away his excuses. He knew he couldn't hide forever. But for now he decided to let things stay as they were, pure, simple, and honest. Because in Amara's world, love wasn't measured by what you had, but by who you were. And Tund wanted to be loved, not for his cars, his money, or his title, but for his heart. Outside, the rain started again, softly tapping on the window. He smiled in the dark and whispered, Let it rain. I'm ready for whatever comes next. A new week began with the sun shining bright over the busy streets of Lagos. The city was full of sounds, cars honking, people shouting, and the smell of roasted corn in the air. Amara opened her bakery early, smiling as usual. The sweet smell of fresh bread filled the little shop, and her laughter echoed as she greeted customers. She looked down the road several times that morning, expecting to see the old taxi with the cracked mirror and faded yellow paint. Every day, Tund came around before noon to help her move flour bags, fix small things, or just talk while she baked. But today he didn't come. Maybe he's busy, she said softly, brushing flour off her hands. As the hours passed, the sun climbed high. Amara sighed, wiping her forehead. Her heart felt a bit empty without seeing him. She didn't know why she missed him so much. Maybe it was because he always made her laugh. Maybe it was because, with him, life felt lighter. Just as she was serving the last customer of the afternoon, she heard the loud sound of an engine outside. A black luxury car, long, shiny, and clearly expensive, stopped right in front of her bakery. Everyone nearby turned to look. The car didn't belong in that street full of small shops and motorcycles. The door opened and a man in a suit stepped out. He looked neat and confident, holding a tablet and talking into an earpiece. He glanced around before walking toward the bakery. Excuse me, he said in a formal tone. Is Mr. Tund here? Amara froze. Tund? She repeated, confused. You mean the taxi driver? The man smiled politely. Taxi driver? He looked amused. No, ma'am. Mr. Tund is the CEO of Sunride Transport Group. We have a meeting with him nearby, but he stopped here first. I'm his assistant. Amara blinked, unsure if she heard right. CEO. Before she could say more, the back door of the car opened and Tund stepped out. But he didn't look like the man she knew. Gone were the simple shirt and worn shoes. He wore a fine suit, his watch shining in the sunlight, and his hair neatly styled. Her mouth fell open slightly. The man who used to fix her shelves, carry her bread trays and joke about traffic, was standing there like someone from another world. "Tund?" she whispered. He looked at her, guilt in his eyes. "Amara?" His assistant turned to him. "Sir, the board is waiting. We really must go." Amara's heart skipped. "Sir?" She repeated the word quietly, almost like it didn't belong in her mouth. "Sir?" The sound of it felt strange. She had never called him that before. Her chest tightened as she looked at him again, not at his clothes or the car, but at the distance that suddenly stood between them. Tund sighed deeply, taking a small step closer. "Amara, I need to tell you the truth," he said quietly. "I'm not really a taxi driver." The words hit her like cold rain. She stood still, her mind spinning. He looked down, unable to meet her eyes. "I own one of the biggest transport companies in Lagos, Sunride. The taxis, the buses, the drivers, they all work under my company." For a moment, the world seemed silent. The noise of the street faded. All Amara could hear was her heartbeat. Finally, she whispered, "You lied to me?" Her voice cracked with pain. Tund shook his head quickly. "No, Amara. I didn't mean to hurt you. I only wanted to find something real. Everywhere I go, people see my money first. They see my cars, my clothes, my name, not me." She swallowed hard, tears welling in her eyes. "So you came here, pretending?" He nodded slowly. "I had to know if love could exist without money. If someone could see me for who I am, not what I have." He paused, looking at her softly. "You did that, Amara. You showed me love without knowing who I was." Amara turned away, wiping her eyes quickly. She didn't want him to see her cry. Her heart was torn between anger and confusion. "You made me believe we were the same," she said quietly. "You let me think you were struggling too." "I was struggling," Tund said, stepping closer. "Not with money, but with loneliness. Every woman I met wanted to marry my name, not my heart. Then I met you and you were different." Amara's lips trembled. "Different how?" "You never asked for anything," he said. "You gave instead. You worked hard, smiled even when you were tired, and cared when no one else did." She stood silently, her hands trembling. "But still, you lied." Tund's shoulders dropped. "I know. And I'm sorry. I should have told you earlier, but I was afraid. I didn't want to lose what we had." The street was quiet now. Even the people watching nearby pretended not to look, sensing something deep happening. Amara took a deep breath. "All this time I thought you were one of us. I thought you understood what it meant to fight every day just to survive." "I do understand," Tund said gently. "Maybe not in the same way, but I know pain. I know emptiness. Money never filled it. You did." Her heart softened a little at his words, but her mind was still heavy. "You had no right to test me, Tund. Love isn't a game." "I know," he whispered. "And I never meant it as one." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded paper, a business card. He placed it on her counter. "That's my real world. But the man you met, the one who helped you fix your shelves and carried your bread, that's me too. That man was not a lie." Amara looked at the card, then at him. "Why are you telling me all this now?" "Because I can't keep pretending," he said quietly. "I care about you too much to lie anymore." The assistant cleared his throat softly. "Sir, we really need to leave." Tund nodded slowly. "Give me a minute." He looked at Amara one last time. "I'll come back later. You don't have to forgive me now, but please, remember the man you laughed with. That's who I truly am." He turned and walked toward the car. Amara stood still, watching him go. Her heart ached, but something deep inside her told her he was sincere. The luxury car door closed. The engine roared softly, and soon the vehicle disappeared into the traffic. Amara stared at the street for a long time, holding the business card in her hand. The name printed in gold letters read, Tund Adebayo, Chief Executive Officer, Sunride Transport Group. She whispered his name slowly. Tund Adebayo. Then she smiled sadly. So, the taxi driver was a billionaire all along. That night, Amara sat alone in her bakery, the lights dim and the smell of bread fading. She thought about his words, about loneliness, love, and truth. Part of her wanted to hate him, but another part remembered his laughter, his kindness, and the way he ran through the rain just to protect her. She sighed softly. Maybe his heart was true after all. Outside, the stars shone brightly above Lagos. Somewhere across the city, Tund sat on his balcony looking at the same sky. He closed his eyes and whispered, I just hope she understands. The morning sun rose softly over the busy streets of Lagos, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold. Amara was already at her bakery, arranging loaves of bread and greeting early customers. Life had slowly returned to normal, but deep inside, her heart still carried a quiet ache. Since the day Tund revealed his secret, she had thought about him every single day. Sometimes she felt angry, sometimes sad, and sometimes she smiled at the memory of how they first met in his old taxi. It was strange, she missed him even though he had broken her trust. She told herself to forget him, to focus on her work, but each morning, when the bell above her bakery door rang, she secretly hoped it would be him walking in. Yet he never came. Days turned into a week, and the silence between them felt longer than it really was. Then, one quiet afternoon, as Amara was sweeping the floor, she heard the sound of a car stopping outside. She looked up, expecting to see one of her suppliers, but instead she saw him. Tund stepped out of a silver car, dressed simply this time, no suit, no bodyguards, no assistant. He was holding a small bunch of flowers, their petals bright and fresh like a new morning. He stood at the door for a moment, unsure if she would let him in. When Amara saw him, her heart skipped a beat. She froze for a few seconds, her hands trembling on the broom. Then slowly she walked toward the door and opened it. "Tund," she said softly. He smiled nervously. "Amara." There was silence between them for a few moments, the kind of silence that carries both pain and hope. Finally Tund took a deep breath and spoke. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "I'm sorry for hiding my truth. I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted to know what real love felt like, not love bought by money but love earned by heart." Amara looked at him quietly, her eyes calm but thoughtful. "You lied to me," she said simply, "but I understand why." Tund blinked in surprise. "You do?" She nodded slowly. "You wanted real love, not fake smiles. You wanted someone who would stand beside you not for what you have but for who you are." He looked down, relieved but still unsure. "And you think I deserve that chance again?" Amara didn't answer immediately. She turned, walking back to the counter where her loaves were cooling. She picked one up and placed it in a small brown bag, then handed it to him. "Here," she said. "Bread for your journey, in case you go away again." He smiled sadly, taking it. "I don't want to go away anymore," he said softly. "I came to stay." Her heart softened at his words. "People say money can buy everything," she said gently, "but it can't buy trust. It must be built slowly." He nodded. "Then let me start again, slowly, honestly. No secrets, no lies." She looked at him for a long time, then smiled faintly. "Only if you promise to never hide again." "I promise," he said, his voice firm. For a few seconds they just stood there, two people who had been strangers, friends, and now something more. The noise of the city faded behind them, and all that remained was the quiet heartbeat of forgiveness. That day marked a new beginning. Tund kept his promise. He came to the bakery every morning not as a billionaire but as a helper. He rolled up his sleeves, kneaded dough beside Amara, and laughed with her customers. Sometimes people didn't recognize him. To them he was just another worker. And he loved it that way. One afternoon Amara asked him, "Don't you have meetings or big business deals to attend?" Tund chuckled. "This is the most important deal of my life," he said, dusting flour from his hands. "And I don't want to lose it." She laughed softly. "You and your words." As days turned into months, the bakery grew. They started selling more bread than ever before, and people loved the friendly atmosphere. Tund used his resources quietly to improve the bakery, new ovens, clean shelves, and fresh uniforms for the workers. But he never took credit for it. He said it was Amara's dream, not his. Then one day Tund came to her with an idea. "Let's open another bakery," he said, excitement in his eyes. "Another one?" she asked, surprised. "Yes," he said, smiling. "But this one will be for poor families, a place where people who can't afford food can still eat for free. We'll call it Heart Bread." Amara stared at him, her heart filling with warmth. "You're serious?" He nodded. "Completely. You taught me that kindness is the only wealth that grows when you share it." Her eyes glistened with emotion. "Then let's do it." Together, they opened the new bakery in a poorer part of the city. It wasn't big or fancy, but it was filled with laughter, smiles, and the smell of warm bread. Children came running in after school, women brought their babies, and old men sat by the window enjoying free tea. Tund and Amara worked side by side every day, serving people, laughing, and living simply. And whenever people asked how they met, Tund always smiled mischievously before saying, "In a taxi, the richest ride of my life." Amara would blush and shake her head. "You never stop saying that," she'd tease. "I never will," he'd reply. "Because that ride changed everything." Their story soon spread across Lagos, not as a tale of wealth, but as a story of humility, love and second chances. People admired Tun not for his money but for his heart. And they admired Amara for her forgiveness, a woman who chose understanding over anger. As the years went by, their bakery became more than just a business. It became a home for many who had nowhere else to go. Tund often told the workers, "Here everyone eats, rich or poor. That's the rule." Sometimes, when Amara caught him smiling at the crowd, she would whisper, "So, Mr. Billionaire, do you miss your big office?" He would laugh and say, "Not at all. This bakery is my new company. My customers are my shareholders and your smile is my profit." Amara would laugh too, shaking her head. "You're still full of words. But only the true ones," he'd answer softly. One evening, as the sun set over the city, they stood together outside the bakery, watching the sky turn golden. Children ran by, people waved, and the smell of bread floated in the air. Tun took her hand gently and said, "You know, I used to think I had everything, cars, houses, fame. But now I know what wealth really means." She smiled. "And what's that?" He looked at her lovingly. "Having someone who loves you for who you are, not what you have." She blushed and leaned against him. "Then you're the richest man in Lagos." He laughed softly. "No, I'm just the luckiest taxi driver who ever lived." The evening breeze carried their laughter down the street, mixing with the sound of people chatting and children playing. Life was simple, warm and peaceful, just as both of them had dreamed. And whenever a new customer asked about their story, Tund would grin, point to Amara and say proudly, "That woman changed my life, one taxi ride at a time."